Hello, everyone, and welcome to this January 2022 session of Media Meet and Greet. My name is David Shapiro, and it's my pleasure to be mediating in today's discussion. I'm Managing Director of 3B Media, a boutique consulting firm specializing in business of broadcast, namely broadcast and media workflows, data and metadata management, as well as the procurement and implementation of suitable software solutions for this purpose. So exactly 26 years ago, in January 1996, Bill Gates published his famous essay about the future of the internet, entitled "Content is King," a term often associated with Mr. Gates. In the essay, he prophesied how the internet will become a source of content and information for business, pleasure, and recreation alike. But in fact, this term "content is king" was actually devised 2 years earlier, in 1994, by Summer Keystone, former CEO of CBS and Viacom. The content Keystone was referring to was, of course, video and programming content, but he also referred to another important element: distribution. He was quoted saying that if content is king, then distribution is prince. He prophesied that over time, with enhancements in technology, distribution channels would develop and improve, but the content itself would remain and must remain as relevant and as engaging as possible in order to attract audiences. Viewers don't watch a channel or platform, he said, they watch the content on that channel or platform. And looking around us today, he was absolutely spot on. On the other hand, Bill Gates' interpretation of content was slightly different from that of Redstone, and he was not referring only to video content, but to information as a whole. In today's broadcasting landscape, we need to combine the content of both of these visionaries. Content and distribution are, of course, vital, but it is the management of the processes and information around these elements that can make all the difference to the bottom line. With that said, in today's session, we're going to be discussing just that and look at how we can continue to create and distribute great content while at the same time optimize and improve workflows and the business behind the media supply chain from both an operational and financial perspective. Joining us today are three people who meet the challenges of the business of content and management media every single day. First, I would like to introduce Rachel Joseph. Rachel has worked in the TV industry for over 30 years. She started her career at the BBC as a runner on EastEnders, and she moved on to work at ITV, Granada TV, and as well as Pinewood Studio, heading up studio and post-production operations at these companies. In 2007, Rachel moved back to the BBC, working as a production executive, and later joined the commissioning department of the television division, where she oversaw the replacement of BBC's broadcast management system. Rachel now heads up the Department for Business Systems for BBC Television. Hello, Rachel. Thanks for being with us today. We also have with us Darren Long. Darren spent 7 years working at the National Film and Television School, teaching students in television production, before joining Sky with its establishment back in 1989, overseeing the technical operations developments and innovations across Sky Sports. In 2012, Darren took over the leadership role for Sky Production Services, and Darren's current role at Sky is Group Operations Transformation Design within the Center of Technology and Innovation, looking at how to transform operations when moving into new workflows and business models. Hello, Darren. Thank you for joining us today. Finally, but not least, is Ivan Verbeselt. In the past, Ivan has held positions as Senior Vice President of Marketing at Nagra Kudelski, as well as Vice President of Product Marketing and CTO of Broadband at Alcatel, where he set up and scaled up the IPTV business. Ivan currently holds the position of Chief Product and Marketing Officer with Mediagenics, the sponsor for today's session. Hello, Ivan. Pleasure having you with us.
Very nice to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so we are short on time, so I would like to ask each of our panel to keep their responses, please, as concise as possible. So let's dive in. So the media supply chain. What is that exactly? I think we can agree that any person you ask will give you a different answer. So I would like to ask exactly that question to our panel. Rachel, starting with you, if I may. what is the media supply chain to you, and how do you view this media supply chain?
Sure. So, from my point of view, I understand it's about getting content to our audiences. But along the way, it's about how we manage our metadata. And what I'm interested in is how we can exploit our rights for our business effectively. So, we now have a proliferation of different platforms that we place our content on, and we are predominantly mastering to for audio to sounds and for TV to iPlayer and online and everything else in between. I think, my main focus is that supply chain when the metadata starts being entered in and then the usage at the end. And so I am encouraging and looking at how we can improve that supply chain throughout for metadata.
Okay, thank you very much. Darren, same question to you. How do you view the media supply chain?
So I think it's slightly different, only because of the experience over the last few years that we've been doing here at Sky. So effectively, it's services to our customers. The media supply chain is everything from applications, deep links, and metadata, as Rachel already mentioned. But equally, it's obviously great content and great services to the customers. So the supply chain, is like any other supply chain in any other industry. It's about getting the right content, services, and experience to the people who want it, and that fundamentally is what we're trying to do.
Okay, thank you very much, Ivan. From the vendor side, obviously you're looking at it from a bit of a different angle. How would you view the supply chain?
So I'd say it is what connects the dots for all things content in a media operation. And as much as I like the metaphor of Bill Gates, I'd like to introduce my own one, if you don't mind. I'd say if content is the blood of a media operation, then the content supply chain is the bloodstream. And for it to be a healthy organism, the blood should freely flow without obstructions. That's in the human body, but it's also in a media operation. And making that healthy is what enables collaborative workflows to exist all across the media operation, whether it is between the departments internally, but also at adjacent suppliers and buyers of information or content, if you want. So there's the B2B component, but definitely a very strong internal component. So when all is well, it is something that is sees and revolves around a single source of truth. Now, of course, it's not always well, and there's room to improve, and there's definitely a journey to be taken here, but let's explore that throughout the panel.
Okay, thank you very much. So obviously we've seen three quite different approaches as well, as we mentioned. But talking about the vital parts of the media supply chain in the industry, I refer to something that I personally refer to as the triple multi-management. So we have multiple platform, multiple formats, and multiple languages. So Darren, if I may, I'll address the next question first to you. When managing content across these three multis, the platforms, languages, and formats, what would you say are the toughest challenges you need to deal with within the media supply chain?
I think you've already named it. It's localization and accessibility for the customers. I think if you look at the opportunity in the future, and it's somewhere where all of us need to go, the highest cost and the highest part of the operation is always around how we get our content out to the widest population. If you look at Netflix, for instance, and Amazon and all of those sort of global players, they spend an inordinate amount of money and time localizing their content. And that's one of the things which I think from a point of view of a media supply chain, we have to get much smarter at. The other thing we have to get much smarter at is we're all doing the same thing. And obviously, one of the things we've got to recognize is that rights go around, content goes around, but equally, we should not be doing the same things across all of our portfolio of work. So I think, to answer your question succinctly, it's that localization and accessibility that really is challenging in the marketplace. And then I think you layer on the complexities of day and date deliveries. And I think you kind of get the areas where a lot of us have to do an awful lot of work and spend an awful lot of money.
Okay, thank you very much. Rachel, what do you think are the biggest challenges in the multi world we live in?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a question really more for our commercial arm in BBC Studios. They're a well-oiled machine in this kind of subject matter. I mean, obviously shows like Strictly are being re-edited as they're going out live, to then be distributed around the world. We've obviously got global news, and we're with Arabic and Persian and various other programs that we're redistributing. So it's a question for them really, but I mean, it's just sheer volume, isn't it? And I'm interested in Darren's point about making sure we don't do the same things, and which I think is a really valid point.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Ivan.
So I think hearing all that, and I, by the way, wholeheartedly agree with those challenges. The challenge is how to expand the lifetime value of content, because content ROI is one thing. Our ROI is a division of two things: it's return on investment. What is in the denominator is the lifetime value, and indeed localization, how you repurpose content. Then I think the content supply chain has to be designed with agility in mind. So there's of course the efficiency element, how you avoid waste in your supply chain, to talk really supply chain language. That's the cost side. The more important element is how to be efficient in the lifetime engagement of content, how to be efficient in engaging the audience, and to be agile in enabling new monetization vehicles and new distribution methods, without and having fast time to value there, without having to re-engineer time and again how it is being done. It should be done. The platform should allow you to do that in an efficient way, and to readily add new monetization vehicles to it with the localization and so forth. So repurposing content to extend lifetime value is, I think, one of the most important elements here to work on.
Okay, thank you, Ivan. So obviously you've all discussed or mentioned in one way or another that we need to look at getting ROI, which of course is the main topic of today's session. But also we've talked about, or you've mentioned optimization and optimizing workflow, which really brings us to the key question, and that is around content monetization. Now, it's a huge topic today. Everybody's talking about it. The topic has been around for a long time, and everybody is constantly looking to increase revenue and also to reduce costs around the content production at the same time. So my next question would be, what do you see are the key factors you need to address when monetizing your content? And at the same time, what steps would you take in order to optimize the process? So this is a two-stage question. Ivan, if I may, let's start with you this time.
Yeah. So I think Darren put it very nicely at the start, that indeed the media and entertainment business is in essence fundamentally a supply chain challenge. It's how to connect content, the right content to the right content, a right audience at the right time through the right channel. And any ROI measure, whether it is relying on lifetime value of content, whatever, is always going to come back to how well you do that. So before we optimize, I think, is to recognize how the current supply chain operates and how to make it maximally low waste and maximally touchless. And there, I think the crux of the matter is indeed a single source of truth, is connecting dots, and connecting the dots within the enterprise. That means from the strategy department, where strategic planning and budgeting is being done, all the way down to the planning and execution departments, and to avoid that these people are that those processes are beyond just being cobbled together and people sending god-awful spreadsheets to one another. So that's the quick win. There's the low-hanging fruit there in connecting the dots. I alluded to it before. I think we can even go further and connect the dots in a B2B way. Like once you've decided to produce content, and Darren's point of avoiding to do things over time and again, once you decide to produce content or to commission content with a third party, why not have that company directly start entering content metadata or scripting data, whatever, into the same platform, as opposed to mailing things around and entering it there. Sort of same thing at the sync side as much as the source side. There's digital marketplaces that can be added to it. There's many more things of optimization that can be done. But in the end, this all means to an end. This is about doing things right. It's not necessarily about doing the right thing. And doing the right thing is how to help people not to spend time and resources on trying to work around processes that are not ideal, but focus on indeed increasing lifetime value of content, on how to repurpose content, how to engage the audience, how to curate for the audience. So I think it's walk before you run. First, get the basics right of connecting the supply chain internally and externally if possible, and then layer on that and use that as a vehicle to then bring data in and be more efficient in engaging the audience. It would be my 1 minute thought around it.
Okay, thank you very much. So Darren, what views do you have on content monetization? What can you add?
Well, let's take very quickly, let's take the supply chain in its essence, which is, and Ivan's already touched on this, the element of truth. So the metadata system that is the point of all truth, pushing your content into a cloud-based service, so to ensure that you've got a much more agile and ability to take one asset and repurpose it on many occasions. It's also setting yourself up with your business process correctly, making sure you're planning your scheduling is very light touch, and content tiering to ensure that you're not putting all of the value into things which really don't need that value. So, and then it's making sure that your workforce are working a lot smarter, not harder. And I think when you're dealing with volumes of content in excess of 200, 300, 400,000 assets per year across all of your platform, you've got to set yourself up in a really clever way to ensure that your staff are doing everything by exception. So that's everything about going out and getting the content. So that's making sure that can run on your scheduling system, making sure that validation and checking is done before you even allow any content through your front door, to ensure that actually you're not checking content and then processing content that has an error and a fault, and automatically sends that back to your customers. And then you need to ensure that actually all the way through the supply chain, you minimize the amount of touch points all the way through there. So I think if anyone's thinking about what is a supply chain of the future, is the key one for me is making sure that you really understand, number one, where you need to put value, and number two, where to take people out and make sure that the operation is as clean and as quick as possible, because ultimately you need to get that content in, processed and delivered in the shortest period of time.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting. So bottom line is, if I was to summarize, Ivan talked about connecting the dots. In other words, walk before you run, making sure that your processes are in place. And then once those processes are in place, then of course we need to ensure that they're being optimized continuously. And as you pointed out there, Darren, to make sure that people are doing just the necessities and not wasting time on excess work. So that brings me to we've talked about people, it brings me to another very hot topic as well today, and that's AI, artificial intelligence. Now, we all know that AI is becoming more and more part of the supply chain, especially around metadata entry and discovery, video and image recognition, etc. So the question I would like to pose to you guys is, what type of role do you see AI play, or what type of role would you like to see AI play in the future, and how will this impact the supply chain? Rachel, if I may, we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure, of course. So, we've got a lot of very clever people in our R&D department looking at AI for now and the future. We've looked at some AI. I have this sort of image that I can throw. We've got 100 years of program content and something like 6.5 million assets or something. And I have this image that I can sort of throw 1,000 contracts and somehow go through the AI process and end up with all the data that I need. We've done some sort of, that would be really useful, wouldn't it? From my point of view. But, listen, I'm going to leave it to the R&D department to come up with something. I'm waiting to be massively impressed by something.
Okay. Darren, your thoughts on AI?
So make sure, number one, that you don't think AI is the holy grail. What AI is about taking out repetitive instructions and ensuring that, again, it's an area where you can focus on putting it in when you need to look at constant sort of changes within, let's call it, scheduling systems, the ability to do automatic checking on content and validation on content. So AI is an enabler that really allows you to kind of minimize the amount of, again, touch points that your team and your operations are doing. I think it's also really interesting for the future because I think there's a lot of value that certain people put into things like scheduling. Now, we know from a planning and scheduling point of view, there's value in editorial scheduling, but there's not value in just planning. In other words, putting content into boxes. So all of that work can easily be done by robotic processing to ensure that actually all you've got is a really good algorithm that is populating the schedules to ensure that you're getting a really good sort of content discovery for your customers. And what we're finding, and when we're looking at things like this, is that it's really showing huge benefits, and is because it's repetitive and because it's working on algorithms, it's not emotional. In other words, it's taking data from various different places, ensuring that the best content comes to the top, and making sure that it's placed in a really good place for the customer to find it within the merchandising rails. So I think AI plays a really important part in the content supply chain, but I equally think you need to be very careful where you apply it and make sure that you don't think it's going to solve all your problems. What it will do is help you to get to a much quicker, faster, and slicker operation, but it doesn't solve all the problems at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Darren. Ivan, I know that Darren has touched on some issues that I know are very close to heart at Mediagenic. So how do you guys view the AI moving forward?
Yeah, we're very excited about it, and we keep growing our data practice. By the same token, I'd like to chime in on the nuances that have been put here. To be honest, I don't like the term artificial intelligence. I rather prefer in this context something like augmented intelligence, recognizing the fact that the whole content operation, there's not a science here. And we, in many cases, even though we try and manage by exception, and I like that notion that Darren brought to the table, that's as touchless as possible, we're still going to be, in most cases, even in the most sophisticated AI cases, with a human in the loop type of scenario, where you do trivial things automatically and then have someone vet it. That's I'm afraid, have a walk before you run here. There's providing access to all the data, making the data, to cleanse the data, making it accessible. But the first low-hanging fruit is not AI. It is getting insight, it's business insights in what is there. And going back to our topic of content ROI and lifetime value, it is of course a data-driven game, and you can't fly blind. So I talked about connecting the dots. You don't just have to connect the dots, you also have to close the loop. It's not a one-way street from strategy to planning to execution. You need to learn back and feed that back into the data. And then ultimately you want to have actionable content intelligence, if you want, at the core of what is your windowing, how agile you're there, your publishing across multiple platforms, your curation, how to drive engagement, discoverability. So it is an art and a science, but of course you want to have data in there to drive that. Some examples, and they can be really down to earth. Some are not AI at all. There's some down to earth insights, like we've introduced the concept at BC of a content cockpit that gives you measurable and quantified insights into how content is performing in terms of return on investment, but also in terms of consumer engagement. There's no AI there. It's just putting data at the fingertips of strategic planners. Can you go further? For sure, you can go further. Close the loop and train the right machine learning algorithms. You can do ratings prediction. We've even had cases where we outperformed the human experts by anything between 12 and 25%. And it's because it is, to Darren's point, not emotional. The algorithm is just taking a feature vector, gets trained on a huge feature vector, and says, well, this is what the rating is going to be. Of course, you can go further and indeed go for automated scheduling. I'm a bit careful there. For off-peak schedules, yeah, you could do that. You're never going to automatically schedule your prime time. If you're off-peak, I think it's rather a human-in-the-loop scenario where a template is being created and someone says, yeah, okay, let's put that at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So in summary, a pinch of salt. I think there's huge expectations, sometimes inflated. So let's again walk before we run. Let's start using the data to give ourselves the right cockpits, information cockpits that we can deal with, and then gradually introduce some more capabilities there. By the way, also translate this in how we work with customers now, because we've come to realize that many data-driven projects have inflated expectations, and the only thing that can follow after inflated expectations is a trough of disillusionment. So we're kind of packaging it now more in edible chunks, like not a big 5-course meal, but tapas, if you want, whereby we go for quick proof of value of a data project, and then work our way through that and see mutual value with the customer. We think this is a much more agile and a much more targeted approach than just going for big bang AI-centric approach.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Ivan. Now, obviously, up until now, we've been discussing the back end of the operations of the media supply chain. One of the things, or one of the taunting topics, touches on how you present or distribute your content to the end user, to the viewer. And one of the hot topics, obviously, is around the VOD and OTT operations, and that is what I call the ex-VOD factor, or in other words, how do you present, how do you monetize, what type of subscription do you present to your end user? Is it AVOD, is it SVOD, is it TVOD? We're running out of letters here, but the question is, how do you choose which business model to offer your viewers? Is it one or the other, hybrid? Where do you see the industry going from here? And it was around VOD, especially also including live events. Darren, what are your views on that?
But again, it depends on your business model. You know, if it's a Netflix model, which is all you can eat streaming service that ultimately gives the customer what they want when they want it, then that's great. If it's an aggregated view, which is a bit like Sky, where you're aggregating many players together and then allowing a search and discovery feature for your customers that allows them to then choose where they want to go, and make it easier for the customers, then that's another thing. I think it's important to understand that transactional VOD and streaming VOD, it depends on that. What we found during the pandemic is that it opened up huge possibilities for obviously content that wouldn't have been accessible until after everyone came back from the pandemic, and which we're just doing now. So if you look at transactional VOD, it opened up a brand new opportunity for the Warners of this world and all of the Disneys of this world to be able to sell direct to the customer, which is very exciting. But I think the difficulty for the customer, and I think this is where all of us have to play a really important part as we go forward, is that really clever search and discovery. We've got to make it easier for the customer. We've got to get better algorithms that, again, we're talking about AI earlier, but better algorithms to make sure that we're really serving the customer what they want, not what we think they need. Making sure that we're having canned searches where people are going into Rails and then being served on a regular basis with updates so that they're not getting bored with the content. And I think what's exciting from all of the media players is how we're going to do that in the future, because that's going to be how you keep your customers interested. Because a lot of the things that people do is they do not want to spend hours searching through Rails. But what they do want is the thought and the understanding of the services they buy are going to be really exciting, because they're constantly changing. They're giving them the content they want when they want it, and it's really discoverable and easy. And I think that's where all of our media organizations have a really important role in the future, whether it's an SVOD service or a TVOD service or any XVOD service in the future.
Okay, thank you, Darren. Rachel, the same question to you. And obviously, you work for the BBC, which is a public service. So whenever it comes around subscription and transaction, VOD, etc., then maybe they're much less or much more restricted, should I say. But how do you view the future of subscription / VOD television?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into that really, but I think it's important for PSB to be able to address everything and be able to offer your audience content on the platforms that they watch. I can't really talk about subscription or anything like that, I don't think. So, yeah, I mean, we want to be in all places, don't we? That's why we're doing more and more podcasts, and we're, entering, studios entering into the agreement with BritBox, with ITV. So, I guess we want to be everywhere.
Okay.
But I can't really go into the subscription model conversation.
Of course. And Ivan, how do you view, amongst your customers, obviously there's a wide range of different business models. What do you think is the best approach when addressing or delivering content to end users?
It depends. It's a bit of a stock answer, but one has to know his place. And ours is, of course, the one of an humble enabler of those business models. The art and the science of picking the right business model for the right content and the right type of operation is, of course, remains with the customer. One thing is we do see, however, is a multitude of new models that are emerging. I think there's not one model that stands out. To your point, we're running out of letters in the alphabet. I think that's the one thing that TT and the coronavirus have in common. They're going to get us run out of letters in respectively the Latin or the Greek alphabet. It's, by the way, not just VOD. What we see in the acronym gobbledygook that is emerging from SVOD, AVOD, BVOD, XYZ VOD, FAST, which is not VOD, it's free advertising supported TV. What we see is that OTT is coming of age, and that actually there's not that much. We see a lot of the old business models coming back to OTT now and finding a kind of a new mix. And of course, it's different if you're a public broadcaster. Then, well, subscription is not the obvious topic. It is probably non-topic. In other cases, we see the inverse happen, where things are being taken from behind the paywall and being put in an advertising model. So for second league football, if I recall well, in Spain, it was at one point, and that's just, again, a data-driven game. What makes most, and there, of course, the public broadcaster has a totally different objective and mission in life, frankly, than a fully commercial operation. But for a fully commercial operation, just looking at the numbers and the bottom line contribution, you can ask yourself, what is making me most? The transactional model, subscription model, or the advertising money, if I put like the second league or on advertising supported medium. So there's no simple answer. What we take it from it as a vendor is we're, again, the humble enabler of those models, and we need to make sure the platform brings the agility, or gives you the agility to change course and to redecide again which content is going to be repurposed on what platform. It's not trivial, though.
Trivial, definitely not. No, I mean, obviously we're looking at ever-changing world. And we're talking about the different platforms. Netflix have just now put up their prices globally. Disney just yesterday announced that they will be expanding to an additional 41 countries. So obviously it's the landscape is ever changing, and obviously, as you said, people need to really look and see what type of business model really suits their needs, suits their customers, and obviously does bring in the highest revenue. So looking beyond towards 2022 and beyond, and looking at the general broadcasting landscape, what are your predictions for the supply chain, for the content supply chain? What do you think the industry should embrace in order to make everybody's job that much easier? We have touched on that a little bit earlier today. And generally, what transformations would you like to see, or you think the industry, the direction the industry should go in order to really increase profitability and also efficiency when dealing with content and media management? Ivan, let's start with you again.
Yeah. So there's what we predict and what we'd like to see happen. So I'd like them to converge. If you say 2022, that's only this year, so let's not be too much looking forward.
And beyond.
Again, we'll
And beyond.
And beyond. So in the immediate future, I'd very much like to see more of our customers to actively connect the dots from the strategy to the planning to the execution and back. So it's not a one-way street. And to indeed set themselves up to manage but by exception increasingly. So to connect the dots in that supply chain and stop emailing hideous spreadsheets amongst ourselves. That will be a very good element. And then, of course, the door is open, right, for the content supply chain to, once we sort it out within the media operation, it can stretch across and can actually become a real supply chain where you have production companies and then marketplaces, and we all seamlessly connect that into one buzzing hive of content. That would be my hope, and actually also prediction. I think we're gradually getting there.
Okay, Rachel, how do you view the future of the supply chain?
Yeah, look, I can, not so much for the industry, but more for the BBC. I can sort of see a simplification that Ivan talked about, and looking at our processes. We've got a lot of divisions, a lot of genres that do things slightly differently. So I think that simplification comes in, and more interoperable systems, so they can talk to each other more, and we can share that data, and whether that's a data lake that we can extract information from and put it in front of commissioners or schedulers or rights people. I think that new introduction of different of formats, so bringing IMF in for our UHD delivery, and we're moving a huge amount of data to the cloud for our archives. So I think that will be quite a big thing for the next couple of years as well. Okay.
Yes, the cloud, that's something which we haven't touched on. I tried to keep away from the topic because obviously everybody's talking about it, but I think it goes without saying that the cloud will play a very, very important role moving forward in any type of transformation that will take place. And Darren, lastly, what are your views on the future of the media supply chain? What would you like to see happen?
Well, it's going to be very interesting over the next couple of years or so. I think the expansion and the example of Netflix obviously having to stick their rates up is the fact that they know that there's only so many eyeballs that can watch their content. So they need to ensure, again, that they can produce content and deliver content as efficiently as possible. So my prediction is, and my hope is, that number one, yes, we get more and more organizations going to the cloud, because obviously ultimately that's going to give us the accessibility of that content quicker. Number two, we need to grow up and recognize that supply chains have been around a long time, but we haven't been terribly good at it in the media industry, and we need to start being much better. We're all looking at the same rights. Ultimately, they go round to all the different organizations. So what we've got to ensure is that where value, again, it needs to go in, that's great. But where things have already been done, then we need to grow up and recognize that we need to share that across all of us. Ultimately, whether that's been, accessibility, languaging, or, just different variants of the content as well. And then I think finally, we need to ensure that, our own best practices are improved in what we do. We all think we're individual and we're all special. We're not. We're people who are distributing content to our customers, and we've got to do it in the best and most efficient way. But equally, we've got to give our customers great entertainment when they want to watch it. So it's about that whole end-to-end supply chain from glass to glass, and making sure that we can be as frictionless as possible and as quick as possible and as cheap as possible. And that means that all of us need to communicate, work together, and ensure that actually all of us survive from a point of view of how we're going to make, shape, and share content across the supply chain in the future.
Okay, thank you. Makes a lot of sense. Very, very wishful thinking. Let's just hope that, yes, different companies will be able to actually collaborate and work together. I do believe that that is a good way forward in improving the overall process. Well, we've actually come to the end of today's session. I would like to thank all of our participants today, Rachel Joseph, Darren Long, and Ivan Verberselt. Thank you for those of us who took the time off to join us this Thursday afternoon. I hope you have found this session to be as an informative and enlightening as it has been to me. And at the same time, I would also like to extend our gratitude and thanks to Janet Greco, who is the driving force behind the media meet and greet sessions. And thank you, Janet, for the time and effort you put into arranging today's sessions. So thank you all again. We look forward to welcoming you again in the future for future meet and greet events. My name is David Shapiro, and I wish you, everybody, wherever you are, a good afternoon, a good evening. Keep well and keep safe. Goodbye.